Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're having a good day. I'm Kyle Langham calling in with Chain Fusion Live, and just real excited to introduce you guys to Onchain Outpost. We have Patrick and Brody. How you guys doing?
Doing really well. How are you, Kyle?
Doing awesome. Thank you guys for jumping on. I know, Patrick, you've been doing some traveling recently, and so I appreciate you making some time. You don't look like you're travel weary, so obviously your time in Singapore went well.
Yeah, it went really well actually. There's like a small time zone difference between Sydney and Singapore. Has actually played perfectly into my favor right now because it's 10 p.m. here in Sydney, but my body thinks it's 8 p.m. So I'm just basically preparing for a big night out. Some crypto events right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you calling in. But before your big night out, then. So I found Onchain Outpost a few months ago. I love the content you guys are putting out. Wanted to get you guys on here because you're becoming a big voice in the DAI space for just bringing up new trends, new narratives that are popping up, bringing attention to new products that are coming to market. So give me like the origin story of Onchain Outpost, and then what you guys are what your product is that you're putting together.
Yeah, so Onchain Outpost really started probably about 6 months ago. I had left my job at Masari as a protocol researcher about a year ago at this time, and decided to kind of go just travel and figure out what I wanted to do next. So I was working on a lot of freelance consulting stuff, still within the crypto space, but really wanted to kind of dig deeper into an emerging vertical within the crypto space, obviously, and get closer to the protocols and get back on the research horse, so to speak. So as I was in Italy, I was talking to Patrick about, what could we work on and build towards in these next few, months to a year, and kind of identify ourselves with a narrative that we believe would be viable or strong in the coming years, in the coming cycle. And we were talking about, we had a couple opportunities to write some newsletters for people who were looking to build an audience in gaming and DeFi and all of this stuff. And we were looking at all these different verticals, and we kind of looked closer at the AI vertical and thought that there was missing a lot of content and general understanding of the vertical at large. So we started to take a look at it, and it kind of felt like we were LARPing a little bit in the beginning, because we were like, hey, how do we actually, think about this space? So there was just a lot of technical friction with understanding AI as a whole, and also how it converged with crypto. And that is kind of what led us into building Onchain Outpost, was trying to demystify that intersection of crypto and AI, because there's a lot of just misunderstandings. There's no one who was really doing it well. So we said, okay, let's do it. Let's try to figure out how we can kind of cover this space. Let's try to find the fundamentals that are actually being built, and the teams that are, building in this area, and try to find, different layers of the stack that are, applicable to crypto, and maybe some of the layers that are not applicable to crypto. And we can kind of figure out and point people in the right direction on where to look, and where the fundamental value is being created. So Onchain Outpost started as a daily newsletter, which was insane. I mean, every day Patrick and I were trying to do research into a project or a trend or a fundamental piece of the stack, and reading all these blogs. And it was a really good way for us to kind of bootstrap our knowledge base in AI specifically, because we came from historically a pretty rich background in crypto. And as we kind of went through this process of just putting ourselves through the trenches of slogging out a newsletter every single day, Patrick was up until 2 a.m. trying to, help me draft this stuff. We really, saw where a lot of the value is being created, and really leaning into this during a time where prices were kind of depreciated and undervalued, especially in the liquid markets in relation to the wider crypto total market cap, right? So, as it currently stands right now, even to the total crypto market cap's around like $2 trillion, and all of the sum of all of the crypto AI projects is in like the $20-30 billion range. So there's a clear asymmetry, and there's a clear opportunity asymmetry here that we believe is completely, misvalued. So it's served well. I mean, the air has kind of been restored to the sales of crypto AI here in the past week, mostly, due to a lot of, narrative driven speculation, probably from Singapore, and a lot of excitement growing around the intersection. I think a lot of things are being fundamentally created here in the past few weeks, and a lot of open source research is starting to emerge. So it's exciting time to be interested in crypto and AI, and we're really excited here at Onchain Outpost to kind of be that beacon of non-biased insight into the trends and projects that are building in the space. Patrick, I don't know if you wanted to add anything more to that, but
I'm sure I've got plenty I can talk about, Kyle, but I'm not sure if you had any questions there.
Well, I'd love to get into your background as well, where Brody kind of mentioned he came from Masari and what got him interested in Onchain Outpost. I'd be interested in your journey to the DAI space.
Yeah, of course. My journey in crypto is pretty funny actually. I started this is almost a decade ago, which actually sounds kind of crazy to me to say, but I was in high school and I just started an economics class. And we did this basically paper trading, share trading game where they gave us $50,000 and we just threw it into stocks. And I somehow managed to make some money. So I came out of that and basically decided that I was a professional investor and that I needed to immediately throw my $1,000 of savings into whatever I could. And in Australia, you can't actually buy any stocks until you're 18. So I went on a quest, Reddit, of course, as you do, to basically figure out what I could invest in. And one of those things ended up being Bitcoin. So I marched into the local bank and basically proclaimed that I was going to be sending my money to Poland to buy some Bitcoin. And they basically laughed me out of the room because I was 14 at the time. So basically, long story short, I found local Bitcoins. I met someone in a McDonald's, gave them some cash, got my first Bitcoin. And then from there, just sort of really fell down the rabbit hole and really started to understand the actual reason why crypto was created in the first place and the whole ethos behind the movement. And I was lucky enough to be around during the days when the ethos around decoupling money from state was just really strong, and that's why people were in the space at the time. And now fast forward, I mean during that time I've started working in crypto about 4 years ago. I'm a PM at a crypto tax SaaS company as well, and I started writing for Forbes as well about crypto just to get the word out there. But kind of leading this long story now leads into the DAI space with Brody. We sort of landed on this AI sector, and I just started even just a couple of weeks in really feeling this same vibe, the ethos, kind of similar to back in the day with Ethereum and Bitcoin. It wasn't anything else I'd felt. It was this ethos centered around transparency, democratization of resources, and just actually decoupling intelligence from the state. And I just found that whole movement super interesting. So that's kind of how I got really into the DAI space, kind of off the back of crypto. So that's kind of the journey for me.
Awesome. I love that image of you going to your local McDonald's and paying cash for Bitcoin. It sounds, you think about that, and then you compare that to now you can buy an ETF from any broker throughout the world. Basically, it's pretty impressive how far the industry's come.
Just crazy. It's just crazy, really. It's just completely unbelievable. I mean, I was probably doing it the hardest way possible at the time, and I'm probably the poster child for what not to do as a 15-year-old. Meet some random stranger off the internet and then give them $1,000 in a McDonald's. Doesn't really sound too good, does it?
I would love to go into detail about like what was that transaction like in terms of like how did they facilitate the movement of their Bitcoin into like your wallet?
So like I kind of met this guy through like a combination of local Bitcoins and Facebook. And I was like messaging him, and I'm like, luckily, like very luckily, he was a really nice guy. And he's like, dude, like it's probably easier if we just meet up. I'll show you how to like set up a Jax like paper wallet. So he showed me how to do that, and like literally he sent me the Bitcoin before I even gave him the money. So
I see.
Like, I was in person with him, but yeah, it was very lucky that he was a nice guy.
That's awesome. So let's jump straight in, because you talked about a few I don't want to even call them trends. It's more like use cases for the combination of crypto and AI. Like what are you and I'll leave this more general in terms of like what are you seeing going on in the industry in that space, or if you even want to just talk about more recently what happened at Singapore at Token 2049 and all the narratives there. I'm interested just where you guys see where you see things happening in the space.
I'll give like a high level overview of the space before diving into kind of Singapore and how it ties into that, because I believe that there's still generally a fundamental misunderstanding of what AI is and the components of AI and what creates an actual output that you receive when you go to type into your OpenAI chatbot, right? So that was kind of the first journey for us, was like figuring out what AI even was and how it was built and the stack and everything. So looking at the broad overarching use cases of AI right now, or I guess each individual bucket of what AI is. So this is a very rudimentary, high level, assessment of what AI even really is and how it's built. So at the base layer, you have all of your data and all of your compute, right? So AI models require data to be trained, to be inferenced on, and they use all of that data to basically provide you with the output, right? Or the result. And it uses that, and the goal of that is to reduce the error that is in the prediction. So when you're training a model, you're trying to reduce the amount of errors that there are with the output, with the end prediction. So in order to do that, you have to have hordes of compute to be able to actually train these models and use them. So that is another aspect of that. At the base layer, you have all these computing resources, so all of these GPUs and CPUs that you're sending these requests through, that then go and query all the data and everything. At the next level, you have the actual models, right? You're building the AI models. These are large language models, stable diffusion models, different types of models, in healthcare or scientific use cases. There's a whole different range of families of models with different parameters and different sizes and different hardware requirements and so forth. So that's kind of like the next layer to the pyramid, so to speak. And then the top layer is like the actual application. So like the front end that's being used by the person or the user to then hit on the model that then hits the data and all the compute at the base layer. So these are things like your regular front ends, such as ChatGPT or Kato AI, which is another abstraction from that front end as well, I would say, where they're kind of combining a bunch of different applications into one solid application to figure out the mind share of a certain narrative or query a database full of documentation and so forth. So you actually have the end product that's being used. So that's kind of how that looks like, the stack. And there's, you can go into a much deeper view and granular view of all that thing. That was very rudimentary and high level. But how the actual, I guess, like the life cycle of this kind of works is, first, the data is gathered at like a massive scale. So whether that be through synthetic data sets or edge computing devices that are gathering data, you basically need this data at a massive scale to create these outputs in these results. So then that data is then processed so that the machine can understand how to ingest it and apply it depending on the specific use case. And then there's just this pool of, like I said, of idle resources that are standing by, ready to be used for different workloads, such as inference workloads or training workloads. So for those who don't know what an inference is, it's the actual, like, you querying the model to then receive the response. And it's also the most expensive part of the AI stack. That is just costs a lot of money because you're conducting all these inferences across all these models. And every time you do it, there's a cost associated with that, of course. And then these models are then trained on the data to create, a general foundational model. And then this model can then be fine-tuned to handle a specific use case. So whether your specific use case is, hey, I want to build a model that's strictly going to give me results, the most accurate results based off of queries about, crypto AI, for example. You can build a crypto AI model that's fine-tuned on all of these crypto AI documents so that whenever you ask it a crypto AI specific question, it'll have the most accurate results. And you're not, getting results. You're not basically wasting space in the bottom data level on like recipes to make lasagna or different things that are not I guess relevant to what you're trying to accomplish. And then finally, these models are deployed and hosted so that apps can query them for useful implementations. And all of this stuff requires just a massive amount of computational resources, which can be local or drawn from the cloud, or in this case, distributed through Akash or another decentralized computing network or layer. So the way that I kind of like to think about this space in general is through just ecosystem maps and understanding the stack that way, because it's really nice and organized. And there's a bunch of ecosystem maps. If you're curious to see more, you can actually just go to topology.vc. They have an amazing ecosystem map that shows all of the different categories and use cases for crypto AI and how all of the individual projects slot into that. But yeah, so I don't know if you have any questions about that. I feel like just a general framework for understanding decentralized AI is like really important before diving into, emerging trends that are very specific to that framework.
Yeah, I think you did a pretty good job of categorizing the different areas in terms of, one area you have hardware, which is primarily like GPU networks. Another area you have like data and training resources, then inference would, and then finally like the UI in which somebody's actually interacting. That's how I've always kind of thought through AI in general, but then like you can kind of categorize like, okay, what is this project, where in this stack is it applicable? So then are you seeing out of those different areas like a certain area that's getting more attention than other areas, or is it the hardware, where you have these decentralized GPU networks, is that like where the action's at now, or are you seeing something elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the narrative kind of varies by week and by month, depending on what open source achievements are created that week. Because it seems that there's a lot of things that are coming out, especially in the past like month or so. I mean, we've gotten pretty huge breakthroughs in distributed model training through Prime Intellect's distro, open sourced research paper, and then News Research's distro open source distributed training research paper, and then Prime Intellect's distlo. It's basically the same thing, but it's an algorithm to figure out how to distribute training across multiple nodes that are not co-located, which is a huge breakthrough for decentralized AI. So that was just one example of something that's becoming popularized as a way to further decentralize the AI stack. Other things as well, I think computing in general is just a really interesting topic. I don't know, Patty, you can probably touch on that a little bit more, but that's a trend that's always kind of popping up and resurfacing as the need for this bandwidth, this computing resources grows, because the demand on the other side of the spectrum for AI, like the user demand, is growing as well. So those kind of scale in demand in parallel. And then recently with the fundraise from a project called Vana, they're kind of understanding that there's this data wall, so to speak, where they are having trouble finding different sources of data to actually bring in to use as training data. So they're incentivizing the coordination of more people to contribute to those data sets. So I think that there's a lot of different narratives that are kind of, I guess, changing and evolving as more things are developed and more breakthroughs are found. And next month, it could be something completely different. I mean, this whole distributed training research that came out of Prime Intellect and newest research, it was like about 6 months ago, it was hypothesized that was completely like impossible to do, was to actually train a 100 billion parameter model on top of in a distributed manner. So I think that like these breakthroughs are happening more and more frequently. And if you go into alphaxiv.org, which is just like an aggregation, a portal of all of these open source research papers that are coming out, I mean, you'll see that there's just so much happening. And I believe that the price of all of these AI assets is not actually pricing in the actual fundamental breakthroughs that are being discovered through the space. But I mean, I think like being boots on the ground, and that's where I want to tie into to Singapore and Token 2049. Being boots on the ground is a significant edge in the crypto space. I mean, people at Breakpoint last year were talking about all of these cool Solana projects. And if you had the alpha on the ground, then you knew kind of where to allocate your time in regards to your research. So there's a huge edge in being on the ground. I would like Patrick to kind of talk about, what people are excited about at Singapore and kind of digging into that alpha a little bit more.
Yeah, I can touch on that. I mean, Token was pretty hectic, to be honest. Like, just so busy, and like for anyone who went or even had like a look at the list of side events, it was just like completely ridiculous, to be honest. But scrolling through the side events list before actually going there, it was pretty obvious like what the main flavors of the conference were going to be. And one of those was definitely AI and DeepIn, which is just super interesting. And like even seeing like Sahara AI being one of the major conference sponsors as well. So dangling from everyone's wrists, like 10,000 people or 20,000 people's wrists throughout Singapore for an entire week was pretty cool to see. I don't think that's been the case at previous conferences. So like, it's really clear that like, AI, this crypto AI intersection is like really starting to take off. And like, I guess back to Brody's point there, like obviously it still makes up such a tiny percentage of the total crypto market cap, but it's actually, in the past week, we've had this nice bounce. We've had a few green days finally. And the actual crypto AI sector is like significantly outperformed the rest of the market. We're up like 15, 18% in the past 7 days or so for the whole sector, which is pretty cool to see. So I think like when I was actually there in person, it was pretty clear, like obviously I'm biased because I was going to like AI events. I went to a few sort of like non-AI events as well, to sort of gauge the vibe and sort of see what other people are looking at as well. But it's pretty clear that like a lot of people are starting to recognize this sector as being like something. And I say something because not many people can actually put it into words. They actually, I kind of, by going around and speaking to people and like different investors, people working on projects, VCs, that sort of thing, almost everyone tells me, oh yeah, I think there's something here, but very few people can actually articulate, their thesis on the space, which is quite interesting. And I think it's just basically a signal that we're early. So, which is a nice thing. Like for people who have thought about it a bit beyond the surface level, I think like the more easy concepts to start to understand, like the easy components of the stack, so like data and compute, they're kind of definitely like the sort of go-to thesis for like investors at this point. So like it's obviously really like it's actually, once you sort of look at it and like understand what's going on in the centralized AI space with like Meta, OpenAI, Tesla, like buying up all the hardware and like creating these mega GPU clusters to train AI models. Like seeing that happening, and then also sort of like seeing what's happening in terms of like decentralized compute networks and the like increase in usage that's happening there. It's really easy to sort of see how they're connected, and when we're seeing breakthroughs like distro with distributed model training, like that sort of thing's very easy to link and like turn into an investment thesis. And like even OpenAI's recent release of their new model series, which is like a chain of thought model series, basically like what they're doing there is instead of just constantly training bigger and bigger models and using more and more compute during the training phase of like building the AI model, they're actually doing this thing that's called inference time scaling. So they're actually pushing the compute towards the inference side of things, which is really interesting because these distributed compute networks are actually like pretty well designed to be able to handle it, like inference compute, and slightly less well designed to handle like model training. So it's sort of interesting that we're like heading in this direction, and it's like fairly clear that the beneficiaries are going to be like some of these AI compute marketplaces. So that's definitely one thing that like people are super excited about. And then also data as well. Like there's quite a few good panels on data, like Sapien, for example, gave quite a good panel on like what they're doing with data. And obviously, like Brody said, data is like essential for AI development. So it's like, well, we've all heard it. It's like data's the new oil, basically, and we're running out of data. So we need to find ways to like create new high quality data sets. And if Meta and Google and stuff, like if they're running out of data, then like we have like a serious problem, basically. That's going to be like a significant bottleneck for AI model development. And like one of the ways that we can get around this, and we're seeing projects actually like in this space doing, is using crypto incentives to actually incentivize people to start creating these data sets. Because like in reality, like these data sets are created like and labeled by just like warehouses full of people, which is like, incredibly resource intensive. And like, you can only really do that if you're like a massive company, or if you have a decentralized network of people who are incentivized to do it as well. So yeah, those are they were definitely two of the bigger themes from being on the ground there.
Awesome. Yeah, that definitely, I could definitely see the overlap between crypto and data from an incentives perspective. In a prior life before I got into Web3, this is many years ago, but I was leading an AI project. Well, actually, let me say it this way. I was leading a big data project for a pharma company. I called it an AI project because it's a lot easier to get. Even back in like 2015, you could get a lot more money budgeted for your project. It had some small machine learning component to it, but it was really just a data project, right? You're taking streams and streams and streams of data, and you have to essentially, transform it into something more useful that you could then train a model on. And so your point is exactly like data does exist, right? Like you could think about like every town, municipal town, every city, they track their data at a local level, right? But it's just it's either sloppy or like unclean, or it's, not structured in a way that's useful. And so a lot of that is just, it takes a human to sit down and be like, I have to map this, here's a foreign, a primary to foreign key kind of relationship. And here's how we need to clean this data set so it has the same strict standards as this other data set. And you could definitely imagine how tokens can make that much more efficient across the board. You mentioned an interesting idea about compute moving more towards inference and away from training. Was that something that I guess that was being talked a lot about in Singapore as like this is the new way that people are thinking about basically like the model lifecycle? So less upfront training, more effort on the inference side.
It wasn't probably not so much in Singapore. I was talking to a couple of people who are a little bit deeper in the weeds about that in particular, because like I guess what we're sort of seeing with the models is like, obviously we're getting to the point where like GPT 4.0 and like Llama 3.1, like they're massive, like they're just gigantic models, and like to, you know, make the next incremental step in performance like is going to require like such a magnitude more compute resources to actually train them. Whereas like these chain of thought models can actually be a lot smaller, and they basically kind of have this, I guess it's like circular reasoning. So you prompt it and it will like produce an output, and then it will basically like check its output and like work to improve on it. And basically do that a couple of times until the output's like of a high quality. So instead of just like intent output from a big model, it's kind of like intent and then like this circular reasoning that takes a lot longer and a lot more compute than just like hitting a larger model basically. So yeah, the concept's basically it's called inference time scaling. It's just basically more time spent on the inference component. There's actually a good graphic that kind of shows it, like with these larger models, essentially like the compute for inference like makes up a quite a small sort of portion of the overall compute required for the model. Whereas with these chain of thought models, it's actually a lot larger. And that just sort of ties into these distributed compute networks because they are like designed to be able to handle like inference compute requirements.
I see. I guess it definitely makes sense with the O in ChatGPT 4.0, the omni-channel, right? Like a text input into an inference engine is a small data package, whereas a video input or an audio input is a much bigger data package as well.
Yeah.
I'm interested in terms of what's the best way to say this in terms of like narrative for like why DAI is important relative to just normal AI. You know, obviously like Bitcoin kind of kicked off crypto as you said separate money and state. And then you said that, you know, AI could have like separate AI and state. That could be one way to think about it from a narrative standpoint. Another narrative could just be actually it's just a lot more efficient or a lot more competitive in the marketplace to have a decentralized network competing with a centralized entity like a Google or a Microsoft or OpenAI. I guess what are the narratives that you guys are seeing of like why DAI is important?
I would say that's similar to what we were talking about, just the overall separation of intelligence from state. I think it's very obvious to see the impact of I guess censorship on AI in its current state, especially with all the kind of memes that are coming out. When people go to say something on a ChatGPT, model versus what they say in Venice, and like the difference in the output that they receive. A little bit ago, there was an instance of, I think, Google Gemini just producing completely historically inaccurate images just based off of the biases that were baked into the model during the training process. And I think that it's really important, especially for research purposes, that people receive non-biased outputs, especially if they're trying to come to a factual conclusion on something, especially in like the scientific fields and in the health fields where the outputs are, dramatic for the person who is leading that research. And ultimately, we've reached a point in society, and this might be getting a little philosophical, but we've reached a point in society where people are completely outsourcing their opinions to influencers or just people in positions of power, as opposed to taking a step back and thinking for themselves. Mm-hmm. And AI makes it easier than ever to do that, because I can go and I can say, hey, like, where should I vacation? Like, what spot should I vacation in Italy this month? And, maybe on the back end, I'm a restaurant in a restaurant conglomerate in Italy, and I can go, hey, ensure that every time that this person asks this question into this model, my restaurants and my chains are, the ones that are being bumped to, bumped up the list and prioritized in that output. This is a very, trivial example of something like that, where these models and these these companies can kind of just be influenced to serve what the insights and the results that they want to serve. And it's not a exact representation of everyone's belief on a specific topic. It's those specific researchers at that specific company who are influencing the results, right? And I think that this whole thing is obviously a much more important when it comes to research, political opinions, and people need to be given the tools to make decisions for themselves. And we're reaching a point in society where it's easier than ever for people to just kind of outsource their opinions to big tech and centralized AI and other people who have their own agenda and their own narratives to push. I don't know, Patrick, if you want to add on that.
I was just going to, on that same point, like if you think about, just going to Google and searching for something, maybe you want to buy something, maybe you want to go on holiday, whatever it is, maybe you have a problem that you're trying to fix. You can see that there's sponsored ads at the top, right? So they're ads. So you can kind of make an informed opinion, like, these guys are trying to sell me something, like they're trying to influence me in some way, and you have the option to scroll past them and go check out someone else. You have options available, right? Whereas, like the scary thing with AI is like kind of on this outsourcing your opinion point that Brody's mentioning. If you're just going to ChatGPT or any other like centralized AI provider and you're asking a question, people are starting to take the outputs as like basically gospel, like it's fact. And the sort of scary thing is that like OpenAI's tech is a black box. Like you don't know what it is. You don't know where they're getting the data from. You don't know what the bias is on the data. Like there's potential in the future. Like we don't know what could be happening with that data or like how it's getting influenced. Like maybe a massive brand goes to them and says, like, for example, just like another trivial example, but like a shoe brand goes to OpenAI and says, hey, we'll give you $1 billion if in the data set you make sure that our shoe brand is mentioned an extra 10,000 times or something like that. And you just don't know that bias is there because it's opaque. It's all in this black box. You can't verify it. This could all be going on in the background. And essentially you don't have like, there's no other option. Like you're obviously you can go to another provider, but it's not like Google where you can just scroll past the ads. So that's kind of like, something that I think is quite scary.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That verification, right? That don't trust, verify ethos that our industry has been built off of is very applicable, probably more applicable in AI than it even is in money and that kind of stuff. So now talking through like the landscape changing really quickly, this is a space that's evolving very quickly. It's probably useful for the audience to keep up to date. I know I've been a subscriber to your newsletter for months now. Like give us a background. How do we keep up to date? How do we sign up for the newsletter? Where else can we find you guys?
Yeah, you can find us at onchainoutpost.com. And you could also just go to our Twitter, which is at Onchain Outpost. We've, been really focused on a lot of projects lately, been focusing on the overarching trends. So, expect some more stuff coming out in regards to edge computing, which is another area that we're looking into. Also just model scaling in general. I think that there's a lot of opportunities in that domain as well, with inference becoming cheaper. And yeah, I guess that's where you can find us. I don't know, Patrick, they can find you at Ponzi Patty, and you can find me at Brody Adrian.
Ponzi Patty. So then what do you guys predict? So if I had to put your feet to the fire and say, hey, make a bold prediction for the next 12 months in this space, what would you say?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think that we're going to reach an inflection point where open source AI actually exceeds the results of centralized AI. Because I think that crypto economics and crypto incentives and overall coordination and distributed coordination of people and incentives will ultimately produce better intelligence and better products and better research than anyone within those isolated, siloed, centralized big tech companies ever could. I think the incentives are going to be really strong for people to come together, and we'll reach an inflection point where we actually do flip big tech. Within the next 12 months, I'm not sure, but hey, like even 6 months ago, it took a long time for open sourced products and models to reach the benchmark comparison to centralized AI counterparts. But now we're achieving those results, a day or two after the fact that these new breakthroughs are discovered in centralized AI. So the rate at which we are approaching parity with centralized AI is increasing really fast, and I believe that will flip within the near future. I'm an optimist.
Yeah. That was a pretty strong note to end on. But I'll just add to that, and I'll just say that I think this intersection of crypto AI specifically, like kind of off the back of what Brody was just talking about in terms of like what's actually being achieved here, is this space is actually going to start to get recognized by like the big players, and I think we're going to shed this sort of like weird air of like, is this a scam? Is this like legit? Is AI crypto a thing? I think like we're going to start to see people actually developing like a strong thesis for investing in this space. It's going to become a lot clearer, what's a legit blockchain AI project and what's not. And I just think, like the overall space is just like going to go through this really rapid maturation phase. And I'm very excited for it, to be honest.
I love it. Yeah, actually, I would just echo that. I know last year at the AI4 conference, I gave a talk on crypto and blockchain and AI, and a lot of the feedback I got after you're done speaking, you come off the stage and people come up and talk to you, was very much focused on, hey, are you people were more polite than this, but they were basically like, hey, it sounds like you're just taking two fads and you're smashing them together. This year I gave a talk at Rare Evo, pretty much same material as the previous one, but the conversations afterwards were very much like, well, what do you think about like people are starting to recognize like, oh, let's take that first step of, actually, I believe this isn't just two different fads that you smash together, but rather like there's something here, and I want to take that first step. And so hopefully, in future conferences, if I'm bringing up, it's people are going not beyond the first step, but to step 2, 3, 4, and actually starting to say, hey, I'm launching this project. Can I get some more detailed feedback on this idea or something like that?
Definitely.
So yeah, I want to give everyone watching, go to onchainoutpost.com, sign up for the newsletter, follow them on Twitter. I'll go ahead on X. I'll post I'll tag you guys on a post right underneath this conversation. But any closing thoughts that you guys want to end on?
Yeah, I'm just optimistic. It's a really good time to be paying attention to this intersection. There is a lot of fundamental value being created here, and I believe that this is a superior way of pushing the space forward, especially when it comes to aligning people with incentives. I think that this is an excellent use case for that, and that's why we're in crypto in the first place. Is the separation of money from state and the separation of intelligence from state is the next extension of that ethos, and it's really exciting to be here.
Definitely.
Awesome.
And I'll just echo that and say that to the listeners, like you're in the right spot. You're like, just by listening to this conversation and just sort of like taking an interest in this space, you're already miles ahead of the vast majority, and that's sort of how you do well in crypto. So yeah, well done. Keep at it.
Got to be early. Yeah, always have to be early. Well, Patrick and Brody, really appreciate you guys joining me today. Everyone watching, again, check out Onchain Outpost. It's great newsletter to stay up to date on what's going on in the space. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for another Chain Fusion Live. Guys, have a
Thank
good
you
day.
so much, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.